I read Untamed, or I listened to it on Audible, probably, God, like in the beginning of the pandemic. But I consider that part of my life before I had my like, oh shit, all of this is bullshit. Not necessarily her specifically, but self-help a lot, almost all of it in my opinion, the industry at least, the Tony Robbins, the Gary V's. I really, really started to open my eyes as I started therapy and my journey through therapy. So I listened to it. I didn't really have a huge memory of like, my life was changed by the book, but I didn't hate it necessarily either. But really at that time, I wasn't hating on anything self-help. So I did listen to that book. I never followed her on any social media afterwards. And that was basically my experience. So I do have a little bit more knowledge now because I did some research. But I still have a completely basically neutral understanding, but also, self-help. There's been some debate in those same comments that I was talking about, whether Glennon is a self-help person or if she's just a writer. And I don't know, and maybe we'll discover it throughout this video, but I think, at least in Untamed, her third out of 3 books, her most recent and third book, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's like Untamed, a guide for women, or like something like how to do this and this. So when it comes to that, I tend to think, yeah, that is self-help. If you're just writing an autobiography or a memoir, about your life, that's one thing. But then when it becomes a woman's guide to life or whatever, then I think it's fair to say, okay, that sounds like self-help to me. Who the heck is Glennon Doyle? Not to be confused with Crabbe and Goyle from Harry Potter. Hold on. Everyone's laughing at home, right? Everyone's laughing hysterically. Oh. Anyways. Okay, so she has 2 million followers. According to her bio, she's the author of Untamed and Love Warrior, host of We Can Do Hard Things podcast, and the founder of Together Rising, which is a nonprofit. I took a look at the nonprofit paperwork, like the financials of last year. It seems legit. It does not seem like a Bethany Frankel situation. And that's a whole other story we'll get into at some other point. But she has paperwork. It looks like her claims of, raising $25 million is correct. It looks like they might be investing some of the money that they collect or donations into like a fund, which is not super unheard of. And I could be wrong. I just looked at the paperwork and there was like a section that was like securities and investments. And there was a thing, like a line there with some money in it. But it was not the whole $25 million. So I tend to believe that she's being honest about her claims of the amount of money that she's raised for, it's like women and children going through hard situations. So I'm a fairly, trusting supporter of that cause. I don't know if it's just me, but We Can Do Hard Things was like constantly every place that I went on Facebook during the pandemic. Like, everybody apparently has taken that phrase and utilized it at some point. I feel like, at least in my hometown and like former high school friends, like, we can do hard things. We can do hard things. I've heard it a lot. Apparently that started with Glennon Doyle around the time of the pandemic. So just on first glance, I saw a couple of kids way down, but if I was to look at this and make a quick judgment, I would say I'm satisfied with this. Now, I'm not listening to the videos, but I don't see children. I don't see, toxic diet culture shakes. I don't see selling of products. I don't see anything openly egregious, like, oh my God, like, what is she doing? This is so bad. I don't see, too many ads for things. It looks like they're taking content and she's putting it up on her Instagram. So, I'm scrolling down quite a bit and it looks like they're staying on task. She's not doing a whole lot of things. I'm like, damn, like, this is horrible. So I'll give her a point right off the bat for, at least unproblematic Instagram posting. So already she's better than Dave and Heidi and Rachel, honestly. Okay. Yeah. And I will say diversity wise, that's a good point. It could be better. Yeah. A lot of white people. And there's some women of color in here. It's going to be women. That's primarily her target audience. Her, big demo tends to be women. So I don't think we're going to see many men. Well, there's one. And I don't really have a problem with that necessarily. I sort of have a problem with content, or especially events, more so in-person events or even virtual events, where it's women only, women first, this is a women's event, and then they have like 10 speakers and 7 of them are men. That bothers me. Even when it's a few men, I tend to get annoyed because, and maybe that's not fair, but I feel like a men's event, they're only going to have men and maybe one woman to like tell them about sex or something, or about like, how to win women, because I've seen these like alpha male bro events and they have no problem sticking to men only. But women, I tend to see, a mix, and maybe that's better. But I just think if you're offering the tickets for women only, the audience is women only, but then men are there to teach you, I tend to go, I think there's always positions for women, women speakers. There's a million of them. There's women videographers. There's women, DJs, like I said in the Rachel Hollis case. So I sort of get annoyed by that, or a little, like, come on, this is a women's empowerment event. Let's show it and tell it. But yeah, diversity could be better, but Glennon sort of is acknowledging, or she, from what I understand, knows that she's sort of like the white woman, and she knows she's a white woman, but she's sort of like the white woman leader, or one of the many. And I think that's sort of like her thing. So it seems in a way like she doesn't mind being the voice and the I don't know, like the inspiration for white women. So maybe she's trying to, get those people. So let's read a little bit about her bio. And here's where it starts to get a little interesting. Where is it? Well, like 1,000 links. So she was born in 1976, which makes her, hold on. Her wife is 42, and Glennon is 46. So actually, I thought they were a bigger time gap or a bigger age gap, and I'm actually surprised. They're only a couple years apart. Okay, so she is 46, and she wrote 3 books. They're all bestsellers on New York Times. And she started as a mommy blogger. That may or may not be surprising. That seems to be the beginning. And a Christian mommy blogger at that. She started a blog called Momastery, like mastery with the word mom on it. That's fine, I guess. But she wrote blog posts very similar, I guess, to Rachel Hollis in the sense of, it was aimed at women. It was about parenting as a Christian and, not fully maybe embracing the old school Christianity, sort of bringing new light to an old school way of thinking. So that's where her first book, that's where like the inspiration for the first book came. Then she writes a second book so she has Carry On Warrior, which I believe is the first book that came out, Love Warrior, which was next, and then Untamed. Now, here's my sort of red flag. And I didn't read the first 2, so it could be a green flag, it could be nothing. But her last one, her last most recent book, is about her coming out, sort of. It's more about her and her wife, because she sort of obviously took a non-traditional way of joining the LGBTQ plus community. She was married with children to a man. And in the second book, so this is my not have read the book understanding, just reading and listening to different interviews today. Her second book was all about her finding out her husband cheated on her. I don't know, by several women or like multiple, I believe. And he came clean to her. And the second book was about her deciding to stay with him despite the infidelity. And they were working through things and they were trying to figure it out. And then while she was on her book tour to promote that book, she met, she met her wife. I keep saying her wife, Abby. Yes, Abby. So interesting. Promoting the book about, this is how I saved my marriage. Met this woman. And again, so that's not really like, oh my God, how dare you, divorce, like get divorced, whatever. I don't care. But it's interesting that she met this woman and then the story of how they met and how they fell in love, to me, sounds sort of magical thinking, not super realistic. And maybe there's more to it, but the way she describes their meeting, and we can play a clip about it, it's like, I saw her, this is from Glennon's perspective, I saw her and I just knew that was her, there she is, the love of my life, I love her. And like, okay, I guess miracles do happen, but I just find that explanation of how you met your wife, and like the way they met, and like it was just instant connection, they love each other. Several months later, they're both away from their partners and getting married to each other. I'm not saying that they can't have their story, but I find it as like really applicable advice, or applicable to like, oh, you'll know who you're supposed to marry because you'll be married already with kids, and then you'll be at an event promoting a book about that, and then you'll see them from across the room and you'll just know. It's like, I don't know. Whatever, but it just seems a little far-fetched and a little bit of like, we're the only love story that really does it like this. Like most people have to meet each other, date, take some time apart from their previous relationship, find themselves, but these two have done it sort of differently. Like I said, I don't really truly believe in soulmates. I don't know if I've ever said that, but I don't know if I really believe in that, at least in my own life. Like, I think there's been a lot of gray areas where like, yeah, relationships could have worked, some couldn't have. For various reasons, but I don't think like I lost my soulmate and now I have to, go and marry someone else that I'm not going to love. Like, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I've just never really thought, I used to when I was younger, more mature. I'm like, oh, I'll just know. I'll just walk into the room and Ludacris will be playing our song and I'll just look over and it'll be like, wow, move, get out the way, and we'll just hold hands forever. So yeah, and I think in the book she describes it, and maybe I can find the excerpt of the actual telling of it. Let's see. Describes meeting. I remember it being sort of like, yeah, right, or okay, this is not how it really happens in real life, but I could be wrong. Okay, here is a telling of it. Okay. So Glennon says, I was in Chicago about to launch my book, Love Warrior. Okay, that's the one about making the marriage work despite his infidelity. And I need to look into, we can look at his info. He has an Instagram and stuff. And he's actually the ex-husband. The story that they've told, which is sort of similar to how Heidi Powell used to talk about her first husband when she was with her second husband, Chris Powell. And I don't know if you were here a couple streams ago, we watched a video about Heidi being on like Good Morning America, for God's sakes. And they were like praising her and her blended family because her ex-husband and her current husband got along. So that was breaking news back then. And so this is sort of a similar story in the sense of like Glennon talks very well about her ex-husband and says their marriage was a complete success, even though it ended with her marrying someone else. He appears in some content, social media content, and the wife, Abby, has said, you know, he has been gracious with everything changing and has allowed the kids to love her and that they're very grateful. So it seems like a healthy relationship. Now, the speed in which they met and got together and all that, you know, it seems fast to me. But as long as he's okay with it, and they also have 3 children, which I think that could be pretty confusing to a kid. To a kid or to 2 kids. I think they have 2 or 3. You know, that's a lot to take in a year. Hey, you know, mom and dad, we live in Florida. And then like within a year, oh, mom now is married to a woman and dad is somewhere else. And now we're moving to this house and now this woman's moving in. You know, that's a lot, I would say. I think I would struggle to be sort of like, you'd have to kind of catch up. And maybe they're so like developed and like they're so stable that it's not that big of a deal. But like I said, I struggled with my mom getting a boyfriend. So, you know, I think that's a lot to ask. But, you know, whatever. They seemed happy. So what do I know? Okay, so Glenn says, I was in Chicago about to launch my book, Love Warrior, about my first marriage recovering from infidelity. The tagline of the book was an epic marriage redemption story. So almost, and I hate to continue to compare, but like, it sort of reminds me of Girl Wash Your Face in the sense of the story there was like Dave Hollis and I went through hell, you know, whatever. Like he ignored me. He did this. He left me. He called me a booty call. He was much older than me, blah, blah, blah. But then it ended up that they fell in love and he changed and now they have 3 kids and it's a happily ever after story. Then by book 3, even though it's not about the divorce fully, it's about more so COVID and like Rachel's brother dying. Rachel still promotes the first book as if it's still relevant. Like, oh, Girl Wash Your Face, such a great book still. But if you read the 3rd one, it has nothing to do, like a lot of the values that she had in book 1, she doesn't have in book 3. And I feel maybe this is the same way with Glennon. Like book 2, I'm assuming tells a pretty strong story of, if the tagline is an epic marriage redemption story, by book 3, she's divorced from him and moved on. I think I would stop promoting the 2nd book, but she sort of still promotes that book in addition to Untamed. Sort of surprising, but again, I haven't read it, so I can't say like whether it's completely, you know, a totally different story. Okay, and I was sitting around a table with a bunch of other writers who are also launching books because it was this big event for a bunch of writers who are putting out memoirs in the fall. And then there was this weird moment. All of us talking at the table stopped and everyone looked at the door. So I looked over at the door and there was this human. Well, hold on. This human. Standing in the doorway. And she was like 12,000 feet tall. And she was wearing this little dark gray trench coat and this red blood scarf. And she had this platinum crazy hair shaved on the side. And she was like a guy and a girl. Okay. And like beyond and in between, like I know I've never seen anything like this. And it wasn't just me. All of the writers were just staring at her because it was like the Mockingjay had arrived at our nerdy book party. We were just like, this person is too cool to be in this room with us, but everyone else handled their shit a little better than I did. This is what happened next, which has become family folklore, but there's no awkward situation that I can't make more awkward. It's my spiritual power. So if you can imagine like this big table with all these writers, and then it was the weirdest moment of my life. Just everything in me was like, there she is. Like just an absolute and total recognizing, even though I've never seen her before. But it was not a meeting, it was a recognizing. And then suddenly I come to consciousness and I'm standing up like this at the table with my arms thrown open towards the door. And then I notice that everyone at the table is staring at me and I have to figure out how to get from this position back to my chair. So what I decided to do is just bow deeply and just hope that everyone thought, well, this is just her weird writer's thing. She just bows when people walk in the door. So I bowed and then just sat down. Okay. And then Abby says, so from my perspective, I walk in, I'm a little bit late, which is very uncommon. I hate being late for stuff. I notice everybody's there and I look up and this weird woman is standing there, arms stretched out. And so because of her awkwardness, I now have to find my way around the whole table because nobody else stood up, just Glennon. And this is not like a huge room by any means. There's not like tons of space in the back of chairs, so I got to sidestep my way around the table, and I finally get to Glennon and say hello. And then I sat down in my seat, and we weren't seated next to each other, but I just remember being like, that was very, very interesting, odd even. I was next to this children's book writer feeling like, well, I want to sit next to her, Glennon, for some reason. Why do I want to sit next to her? This is weird. And then after dinner, we had to walk to the stage where the actual event was taking place, and in the literally 3 minutes it took us to get us back to the back room dinner table to the stage, I told Glenn my whole story and she touched my arm. And for sure, that was like a lightning bolt for me. That shocked me. I wasn't consciously aware of it. I think my heart and my soul knew way, way sooner than my brain. And then I heard her speak and she made me laugh and cry and laugh again and cry again. I'm hearing her talk so truthfully about her former marriage, her book, Love Warrior, and addiction. Okay. At the time, it was about your current marriage. So were you aware when you were talking, like, did you change the speech a little because Abby was in the room? Oh, okay. So she says, no one's ever asked me this, but in fact, I did change it. My speech that was largely about my marriage redemption became something different in the moment. It was largely just about all the things that I would think that would make Abby think I was cool. Okay. And then Abby says, I went back to my room that night and she had given me a copy of Love Warrior. I read it from cover to cover that night. I'm a very slow reader and I would rather listen to a book on tape than read it. So I was very dedicated. And then when I got to the end of this book, she didn't really talk about the redemptive part of the marriage in her speech. So I was a little bit like, this is not right. This is not how the story ends. Very shocked. And so when I got an email from her days later, I thought, we're just going to be friends, and that didn't last. Okay. Oh yeah. So also part of the story, she says, and I remember this from the book, I believe, they never touched. They said they loved each other before they had ever touched each other, which I think is sort of odd, but I also didn't come from a Christian background. I came from a Catholic background and I don't know, it's different. Catholics are different, I believe, than like the Christian purity stuff that at least I see on like TLC, like 19 Kids and Counting, where they can't touch each other or anything. So I can't really speak to it myself, but maybe that's part of it, perhaps, why they didn't touch each other, but they were able to like get there. You had never touched, you had never been on a date, and you broke up your marriage without even having experienced this. What if you were not connected? Was there a fear? Like, what if this isn't what I think it's going to be? And then, so they already decided, like, we're going to break up. Well, she was going to break up her marriage. It was already an unhappy marriage that she had written a book about that she was going to work on. I don't know. I mean, I will say she's brave. She's very brave. She's got guts, I'll say, to be able to write that book and then shortly after sort of write another book where she's like, actually, I am with someone else and it's a woman now. It's kind of interesting. And Glennon says, yeah, it didn't matter though, because it was not just like a love story. It was not just like, oh, I am going to stay in this marriage, or am I going to stay in this marriage or marry Abby? It was very clear to me after meeting and having discussions on email that this was a reckoning with myself. It was like, oh, I'm just pretending this thing is something that it's not anymore. It was like hearing from a part of myself that I had buried so long ago. And there she is, and pretending that things are good enough, and pretending that this life, and pretending that this marriage, and it wasn't, am I going to love Craig or Abby? It was, am I going to abandon myself, or am I going to abandon the whole world's expectations of me and just leave this? So it wasn't like I'm leaving because I know this is going to work out. We'd never spent 10 minutes alone together. It was, I'm going to leave because I can't pretend anymore, regardless of whether this works. I mean, I think that's good. Yeah. And then Abby says it was the only thing that made sense at the time. Like, thinking back on it now, I'm like, we were probably literally insane. Like, our brains were so lit up that we couldn't make the right decisions based on external expectations. We were only operating on a soul level. You know, scientists would say your brain lights up in certain ways and that your prefrontal cortex actually is an enabler of making certain decisions when you fall in love. But the truth is, I think it's even deeper than that for us. It was like a recognizing or remembering. When I walked in that door and we fell in love, it was like, oh, this, because I had up until that point, I had been such a hopeless romantic. And Glennon she never believed in love in her life. And I heard Glennon say this as well before, that she never had loved before meeting Abby. I find that to be sort of weird. But I guess like loveless marriages exist, obviously, but I don't know. Like, she was a successful person previous to meeting Abby. She had 3 children. There was no huge indication, from what I understand, that there was some big, other than him cheating on her, which is, you know, but that doesn't take away the fact that you could have loved him in the beginning. But she said that a few times, that like, I never loved anyone, and I had, you know, respect for him and whatever, but I didn't love him like I loved her. I think that would definitely hurt my feelings if I was him hearing that. I mean, maybe he feels the same way, but it's sort of surprising when people come out with that later after they meet their next spouse and they go, oh, I actually never loved that person before. But who knows, you know, again, excuse me. Okay. And then, so for me, this is still Abby. So for me, I always kind of knew that this was possible, that this person was out there. And Abby was also married. I don't know if she was already getting divorced. I'm not sure about the timeline, but she was married to another soccer player, and they got married and lived in LA together in a house. And I think pretty sure it was quick from this event happening to when they like sold, you know, moved in together, sold their properties, whatever, and boom, they were, you know, full on married. Okay, so for me, I always kind of knew that this was possible. Like, this person was out there, and Glennon was like, that's just horseshit. Like, all your romantics can go straight to you know where. But at the end of it, I'm so glad that we didn't listen to the world's expectations of what we should have done in that moment, because I truly do know. And it wasn't easy by any means. It was worth it. And then Glennon says, yeah, and I think in life, you just get a few slices of magic, you know? If you believe in anything beyond the everyday mundane, I'm like, here we go. And we're doing this life we're supposed to. It's like every once in a while, magic cuts through. You know, I just think that is a great story, and time will tell, I guess. They haven't been married that long. I mean, I think they got married in 2016. So, you know, they're coming up on some, you know, significant anniversaries. But I just, and as a non-married person, but as like someone who thinks they're a realist, you know, marriage is a long time. Sparks of love and excitement is great, but is that what makes a marriage? I don't know. Okay, here is an article. So let's go back a little bit. This is from 2016. So I think this is before, let me just search. When did Glennon Doyle meet Abby? Okay, so this article is September 7th, okay? And she has not met Abby yet at this point when this article was written. She met Abby November 2016. And it says, okay, let me just read the Wikipedia. That's my song. Okay, so Doyle was married to Craig Melton, a former model. From 2002 to 2016. So 14 years. They have 3 children. The family moved from Centerville, Virginia to Naples, Florida. She met Abby Wambach on a book tour. Abby Wambach is a part of was on the U.S. women's national team for soccer, I believe. Or you're going to be like, someone's going to be like, it's actually the Premier League and it's not. So one of those big leagues, a very big deal. She's got like $1 million at least. Okay, in November 2016, Doyle announced that she was in a relationship with Wambach. They married on May 14th, 2017. So they met November 2016 and got married in May 2017. They moved to Hermosa Beach, California in 2021, purchasing a $6.5 million home. Doyle, Wambach, and Melton currently co-parent the 3 children, and she states that they all have family dinners together. Well, that's nice. They truly did choose joy. We truly have it all. And, sure, I'll believe it. Why should I not?
They truly have it all.
But yes, fast, in my opinion. I think, I don't know. There's no hard and fast rules of how fast you should get with somebody, but I think in my own personal experience, I haven't really gotten to know anybody in less than a few years at the earliest, and like things can change very quickly, especially with romantic relationships and kids and all that, Anyway, so let's read about her before she met Abby, but after she knew her husband was I shouldn't say a cheater, but had cheated. And let me show the husband just so we know, just so we can ridicule his ass. I'm just kidding. I don't want to judge him necessarily. Like, yeah, cheating's not good. Like, obviously that's a point blank statement, but who knows what their lives are all like, why things happen. She doesn't seem to blame him too much, or oops. Why does this keep happening? Why can't I just move the screen? Okay, whatever. Here he is. He was a former, I don't know what he does now or what he did like recently in his life, but he was a former model. So there you go. And he also likes soccer too. And here, oh no, I thought that was her for a second. Wait, that's the whole fam, I believe. So they look like a fun, like modern, cool family. Like they look like they should have a reality show. Like, oh, the crazy life of the Doyles. And Doyle, I believe, is her maiden name. Yes, it is, because her sister's also named Doyle. And her sister does the podcast with Glennon. Glennon is such an interesting name, by the way. I've never met anyone named Glennon before. What is the witch in, Glenda, right? In The Wizard of Oz? Glenda the Good Witch. Anyways, okay, here we go. Her marriage was the jewel in her blog universe. Then she found out her husband was cheating. And there she is. Okay. The world can be divided into 2 groups. Those who have never heard the name Glennon Doyle Melton, and those who know pretty much everything there is to know about her. The bulimia, oh yeah, FYI, trigger warning from now forward, eating disorder talk for sure. And drug use is possible because that's a big part of her story. The bulimia and the alcoholism, the anxiety, depression, and drugs. They know the contents of her refrigerator, how she looks when she first wakes up, where she finds God, and what she says in response to her 8-year-old daughter's mid-dinner inquiry about how babies are made. Prayer alone doesn't cut it, she explains. The number of people who know these things about Doyle Melton is not insignificant. She's a writer whose publicity team estimates that her blog and social media posts reach 7 million readers a week. And that camp is about to get a lot bigger. So this is pre-Untamed. Untamed is when she really came on the market. I mean, she already was knowing Oprah. She was in Oprah's book club on the first book, the second book, Love Warrior, about the redemption. And then, so she was already getting popular. And then in 2020, she went even crazier, bigger. So interesting to see Christian mommy blogger can get 7 million hits. And then if you leave that away and go, actually, I'm changing completely, you get even more. And I think that's what Rachel Hollis was hoping for, that she was like, I have an exceptional marriage. I'm an exceptional marriage relationship coach, into divorced, like bad spiritual babe, like not bad, but like bad boss bitch. Like, and she was like, I'm just going to pivot. And it didn't work for her. But it apparently works for Glennon. This week, Doyle published a new book about the one aspect of her life that she hasn't fully shared with followers, her husband's infidelity. I also wonder, and then I wonder this about Dave too, like Dave Hollis. What if the men, are they fine? Are they open? Are they just have no choice in the matter of like, hey, I want to write this book about my life. You're a big asshole. Can I write about that? Do they have to ask? I mean, Rachel says she asked Dave recently. She said she always got his approval. I wonder, I'm assuming that happened here. It's interesting that they would allow that laundry to be aired. I mean, I think it shows sort of maturity, but yeah. When they come out with the novel about how bad their husband is, I'm like, ooh, they're okay with this? Tens of thousands of copies have been pre-ordered, and that was before Oprah announced Love Warrior, a memoir, as her new book club selection, a designation almost guaranteed to catapult it onto bestsellers lists. Yeah. Doyle became a quasi-famous person with a cult following in the traditional way. She quit her job to stay at home with her 3 young kids. Isolation, exaltation, and, oh God, I'm so dumb, ennui ensued, as it does. Every day, she says, was too much and not enough. I can relate to that. Too much and not enough is sort of a untalked about feeling. So I heard her speak about this a few times today, and I was like, oh, yeah, okay, that's something I could relate to. Relate about it. It's interesting. And so she was a teacher, elementary school teacher, I believe, quit to take care of the kids and then has time at home to blog and raise the kids and things. So that's sort of a typical story. So it seems either you have to have the time and space to write, to start the blog, to run it, at least in this time frame when blogs are big. Not many full-time working women or men, I guess too, I saw really have a successful blog that took them into, fame. It seems to be, which is a good thing to know if you're looking to do the same thing, you sort of have to be at home and have some free time to write a book or have a successful blog. So it seems. I mean, same thing. I didn't start my YouTube channel until I worked for myself. I don't think I could do this while also maintaining like an in-person office job. So it definitely makes a difference. In 2009, the Virginia native was living in Centerville, feeling starved of authentic connection when she noticed people posting Facebook lists of 25 things about me. While her baby napped, Doyle Melton banged out her own list. She wrote about her conflicted feelings about parenthood and marriage and about her stained daily existence. My number 6 was, I'm a recovering food and alcohol addict, but I still find myself missing food and booze in the same twisted way someone can still love a person who beats them and leaves them for dead. Doyle Melton, who now lives in Naples, Florida, recalls during an interview at her sister's home in Falls Church where she was visiting. Later, she noticed that her friend's number 6 was, my favorite snack food is hummus. That's pretty funny. She's like, I wish I could try heroin. I never got the chance, but if I could go back, baby, I would. And like everyone's like, what? My crazy fact is I have a brother. That's funny. I was like, oh crap, we're not doing that here either, she says. By that, she means telling the truth, the real truth. The one that no one was sharing on the playground or at the bus stop or in church. The one that wasn't airbrushed with smiling family photos and knee-jerk pleasantries. I'm great, how are you? Now, okay, this part I agree with to a point, and this seems to be a big sticking point in her work, in her breadths of work. I don't know what you call it, in her... all the work that she does. She seems to really push like women should be more honest about what they're going through. And I don't disagree. I think I had a very strong perspective on this where I was like, everything should be shared all the time. This fake bullshit, it's not good for anybody. Everyone needs to be honest. And I've sort of started to think like, there's close friends for a reason. And I think sharing everything with everyone isn't good unless you're trying to make money from it, which in this case, it worked out for her in that way. But if you're really just trying to share because you feel like that's the right thing to do, I no longer think that that's always best, because there's a lot of criticism that comes with anything that you say online. Not everyone understands where you're coming from in the first place. And I think it takes away from having those intimate conversations and having someone respond back to you in real life that knows you and cares about you. When you share it out there and blast things out there, I don't think it necessarily always ends up well for the person. Like I said, if you're looking to monetize, I mean, being honest and gritty, that's like very on trend right now in the last, 5-6 years. And I wonder too, in the case of Rachel Hollis as well, how much of it is real and how much of it is, manufactured real. Like, she feels comfortable sharing some things, but not all things. And does that change your perspective on that person and their situation? Because she said, like, she didn't talk about her husband's infidelity until now. So if you were to read something else that she wrote, you might not have that piece to the puzzle. And then now you're applying her advice or her prescription to your life and it doesn't work. And you're like, I don't get it. Maybe because you didn't have that extra piece. So that's my 2 cents. And I think, like I said, I changed a lot. And I think, honestly, going to therapy, as everything, sort of has helped me from that, has helped me realize to like keep some things to myself and not everything has to be shared. And it's almost like trauma dumping or oversharing is like a response because you're like, I've been pent up for so long. I think you find the balance over time.